I am the sort of person that, I like to give people the benefit of the doubt when I meet them for the first time, when I hear about them for the first time. And even though I'm hearing for the first time, when I meet them for the first time, I'm hearing negative stuff about them. I like to give them the benefit of the doubt, because I like to have all the full facts in front of me first before I can pass judgment on the sort of character they have, on the sort of personality that they have. Now, Joshua Fabia, this interview that he's done with the podcast, I think her name was Summer Helen. Now, I will just quickly say this first, and I was saying in my past episodes that I had invited him onto the show, onto my podcast, even though it's a small channel, really small podcast, small channel, trying to grow as best as I can. And I reached out to him to ask him to hear his side of the story about everything that had been happening, especially now he's cut ties with Diego Sanchez. And he replied, I was surprised he got back to me. He said, well, you know what, yeah, we could do that. And he said he'll think about it. I texted him again next 2 days. He said, sorry, can't do it this time. And then he does this interview in which he just trashes and slags off a slang term we see in the UK. He basically shits all over Diego Sanchez. And for me, this podcast was more or less a confirmation of the sorts of character this guy has. From the information I've gathered, all the homework I've been digging, the researching of stuff that I've been doing, the people I've been speaking to, the conversation that I've had, the interview, the podcast he did, just in these 30 minutes that he had with these two people. I think her name was Summer Helen. I can't remember the other guy, Jared something. I can't remember his name, but he's a fighter. He's a mixed martial arts fighter. It really did confirm to me that this guy really is what everybody says he is. He's just a weasel. He's a scumbag. He's a cult leader. He's almost like the modern day version of Charles Manson, the cult leader from the late 1960s in the United States. They who murdered that famous actress back in 1969. But not to get too bogged down in something else, but this interview really, when I listened to it, I had to listen to it so many times just to make sure I understood everything that this guy was saying in that interview, because he was just saying so much stuff, and he really wasn't answering any of the host's questions at all. Anything about the OnlyFans, he wasn't answering giving any proper answers to questions about the OnlyFans. And I think the first or second question what really triggered people's concerns and how this whole thing came about, really, at this point anyway, was the video that was posted just about several weeks ago now, with Joshua Fabia hitting Diego Sanchez while Diego Sanchez is being suspended upside down, and Diego Sanchez is repeatedly being struck in the head and being kicked in the head. And the sort of answer this guy gave in the interview was basically for body or something hardening of the body to get your body used to. Excuse me, to get your body used to being struck in the octagon whilst you're fighting. Excuse me. And they even said that they use examples such as Conor McGregor, who is known for doing very, very bizarre exercises for that sort of thing, body hardening for a fight. But even Conor McGregor did, at the time this video was posted, even he called out Diego Sanchez and Joshua Fabia and said, this is complete nonsense. What the fuck are you doing? You need to fire that rat, Diego Sanchez. You need to get rid of that guy. He's no good. He's no damn good for you at all. So, the reason why I say that this interview for me confirms the sort of person this Joshua Fabia guy is because when Diego Sanchez released a statement a few days before the interview, which was now sometime last week, it's now Tuesday morning here in the UK, excuse me, he actually didn't say anything negative about Joshua Fabia, nothing negative at all. All he said was, he said in a statement, I've cut ties with Joshua Fabia. And I think the only reason he gave, although he said he's still going to give another statement at a later date, but he said in that statement basically, I've had to do a lot of reflecting, looking in the mirror, just really a lot of inward looking at myself, and basically just having to make some changes, having to make some, well, what I say, tough decisions. And of course, one of those decisions, ultimately, from just by judging the situation, what had recently happened, was the fact that he's now cut ties with Joshua Fabia. But he said that he in that statement, he didn't say anything negative about Joshua Fabia. He said actually, he praised Joshua Fabia for some of the positive things he had done for him in the 2 years they spent together. Him being Fabia's student, and Diego being Fabia's him being Fabia's student, and Fabia being his manager, coach, and social media manager, whatever. He said that in the time I spent with this guy, he's done quite a few positive things for me. But apart from that, we didn't hear anything negative from Diego Sanchez about Joshua Fabia. Nothing negative whatsoever. However, in the next few days, well, basically the day after, more or less, that's what it felt like. The day after, Joshua Fabia immediately jumps onto a podcast on, I don't think they have a YouTube channel, so I'm not sure the name of the podcast. I think it's called Behind the Scenes or something like that. One of the hosts, her name is, she sounded, from her accent, she sounded Australian or from New Zealand, but one of the host names was Summer Helen, and I think the other guy who was the male host, his name was Jared, and I think she at one point referred to him as a mixed martial arts fighter when they're talking about the medical records of Diego Sanchez. Basically, so the point I'm making about the interview is that all it was is that you didn't hear anything positive from Fabia about Sanchez at all. So for me, it does confirm that, basically, it confirms what everybody was thinking, what everybody was suspecting. I was kind of thinking along the same lines as well, but I was still kind of clinging onto some hope that there will be an explanation for all of this craziness. There'll be an explanation for all this madness that we're seeing on YouTube, on Instagram, on Twitter, and any other place, whether it's social or mainstream media. There'll be an explanation for all of this, but that wasn't the case at all. The explanation that came basically was more or less a confirmation, and was more or less a confirmation and some sort of reinstating statement that everything that everybody had been suspecting, even those who were very close to Diego, very close to him, but who had been cut off because he had basically cut everybody off, including his family members, because, well, I can't confirm it, but due to his association with Joshua Fabia, it confirmed that this guy was taking advantage of Diego Sanchez. And I think, yes, Diego Sanchez did actually say that at some point he did say this. I may be wrong. He said that he did he realize? No, he did say that Joshua Fabia had been taking advantage of him. That he didn't realize that that's what had been going on the whole time. And understandably, yeah, I can understand why he didn't see that, because there's so much brainwashing going on. You see the sorts of things that he had been made to do, which had no relevance and basically wasn't helping his career, his mixed martial arts career at all. His performance in the cage had gone downhill. He was losing fights, and his last fight that he should have fought with Donald Cerrone, well, he didn't get to fight that fight at all, because it had already been cancelled before the fight could even take place, because there was a phone call that happened between Diego Sanchez, Joshua Fabia, and Hunter Campbell of the UFC, who's the UFC's one of the UFC's lawyers. And in the phone call, well, I'm just kind of repeating information that people know already, but in that phone call, everybody more or less knows what happened. They were demanding Diego Sanchez's health records, and in the interview that Joshua Fabia had with the behind the scenes guys, they pointed out to him, look, why would you be requesting Diego Sanchez's health or medical records if that's something that the fighters should be requesting themselves, if they need to request it in the first place? You shouldn't be. That's something that really it's such sensitive information that really is only for them and for their doctors to request for them and their doctors to handle. So and that, of course, because they understood that that's probably the main reason as to why the UFC more or less released Diego Sanchez from the fighting organization. They thought that, well, not thought, but it was speculated that they're going to get those medical records to sue the UFC. At least Joshua Fabia was. He was trying to build a case to sue the UFC. So, I was really surprised by that interview. I mean, I wanted to have him on the podcast. I asked him, and I've got the text right here even. No, I just approved the two people. Yeah. I'm just going to self-awareness. Yeah. You may not see this because it's too bright for the camera. No, but I reached out to Diego Sanchez a few days ago and asked him to come to my show. He replied, said he said he'll think about it. I reached out to him again in just the next 2 days, and he came back and said no at this time. And probably he refused because he had already done that podcast, and it really did. A lot of people did advise me that actually it would have been a bad idea to have him on the podcast, on my show, because he's such a controversial figure. Despite the views it might get from my channel, and despite the internet traffic it would send towards my channel, still he's such a controversial figure. And after seeing how he responded, how he performed in this interview with the behind the scenes guys, I probably think it was a blessing in disguise, because the guy couldn't answer a single question. He tried to make the whole situation between him and Diego Sanchez about him. He basically threw Diego Sanchez beneath the bus, and basically just slagged the guy off, and was bringing up all his personal issues, that he was something to do with sexual abuse was going on in his personal life, or had happened in the past, drug abuse, steroid use. He said that there was that Diego Sanchez used steroids during high school when he was wrestling. Talked about his married life, and not married life, but issues that he had with his going on in his marriage. And I think his marriage probably fell apart because of the issues he was having with fighting the CTE and stuff, and probably they had an issue in the marriage probably around the same time that Diego Sanchez crossed paths with Joshua Fabia. So it's really telling, this interview, and it seems to be such a hot topic now that many people are really concerned and so angered that this guy came into Diego Sanchez's life and kind of just, even though he's around the time that Diego Sanchez and Joshua Fabia met at cross paths, Diego Sanchez would have been about 38, 39, would have just been about crossing over the threshold of retirement. And even though fine, he was coming to the end of his mixed martial arts career, it could have ended in a much more amicable way than this, because this looks like everything's just been flushed down the toilet. Instead of being known for his legacy for being such a good and entertaining fighter, a good-hearted fighter who clearly had some issues with the CTE. So I just had to increase again in my interface there. Who clearly had some mental, brain issues with CTE because of all the shots and all of the physical abuse he's taken whilst he's been performing and been competing as a mixed martial arts fighter. So, obviously those things are some things you got to take into account as well. But he's such a respected figure in the sports of mixed martial arts, especially in the UFC. So he's been fighting since 2005, such a long time now, about 15 to 16, 17 years, such a long time. He's even been, I think I should know, but I think he's been inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame. It feels so bad because this situation with Joshua Fabia now is going to be what he's going to be remembered for now, not necessarily the amazing fights he's put on for people to watch. It's just so sad. It's really, really sad, but for the fact that he has been that he's now cut ties with Joshua Fabia, and I'm sure he would have seen the interview, he would have listened to the interview, and he would have been able to piece together the bits of the puzzle for himself and gradually understand that this guy was abusing him. When I say abuse, was taking advantage of him, was using him, and whatever Joshua Fabia probably wanted out of the relationship between himself and Diego Sanchez, it probably didn't successfully work out, because looking at what happened, Diego Sanchez was gradually losing his fights towards the end, leading up to the time that he was going to be released from the UFC, and he was paid his fight money, fine, but he was cut from the UFC. And my own opinion of the whole situation, one of my other opinions anyway, let me put it that way, is that probably Joshua Fabia wanted to latch onto Diego Sanchez's fame and fortune, and probably use that to take advantage of that, and probably kind of gradually bring the limelight onto himself and onto his so-called school of self-awareness, which is very ironic, because when you listen to this guy, I'm going to say it now, as I said before, I like to give people the benefit of the doubt, but I think my patience with this Joshua Fabia has just worn completely out. It's worn thin, past thin even. He seems to be the least self-aware person. Whenever you're talking to him, whatever interview you see him in on YouTube or wherever, whether it's an interview or a video on YouTube or podcast, whatever it is, he'll be ranting there for about 50 or 60 minutes, and you'll see that he's actually kind of turned the whole conversation, the whole topic or situation, whatever it is, it's all about him. He wants to be the person in the room who has everybody's attention, and for what? A lot of the things he says, even a lot of the things he said in that interview, didn't make complete sense at all. When he was asked certain questions about, let's say, what I can think of now, the was I made note of this? Yeah, the OnlyFans. He really couldn't give a proper definitive answer as into why he had something like that in the first place. I think he said to the answer he gave anyway was, he said to the host that today, in this day and age, even in mixed martial arts and sports, this is how you sell athletes, this is how you sell fighters. And the host, I think she was sensible enough to see through that and said, listen, I've been in this game for such a long time, for 10 or 15 years. I've worked in so many projects, worked with Paramount, worked with this media company, with that film company, worked with Guardians of the Galaxy. I have never sold or tried to promote any other fighter, athlete, or actor, actress, or whoever in this manner. It's just it's sexually exploiting them, and that's what it is. I mean, one of the quotes was, you like that tight little butt, and quite a few, that not Diego Sanchez, Joshua Fabia had basically these clips of, I think, when he was training, or sparring with Diego Sanchez. And I think what had happened is that he secretly set up a recording of them just sparring and training together. And probably when he was training with Diego Sanchez, Diego's probably wearing just his shorts or boxers, and probably looks a certain way, and probably secretly recorded the image in the video, and saved it, kept it. I'm sure he did this without Diego Sanchez's consent, and probably kept that aside to start an OnlyFans page. And from what I've learned, from what I can see, he was actually charging people to actually see what it was, to see the video. So definitely there was some sexual exploitation, some very inappropriate stuff that was going on there. So yeah, I mean, it just gives you an insight, and this interview is just proper, for me, it's proper confirmation what this guy's really about. He's a fraud, basically. I mean, school of self-awareness, it looks, when you look at all the online content associated to this guy and to his business, this called the School of Self-Awareness, I mean, there's lots of red flags there. He says how he fell into I can't remember what it was now, is it physiotherapy or healing? He fell into it at about the age of 9 when his grandfather had a stroke, and he was made became responsible for his grandfather's recovery and overall well-being and health. And it kind of just didn't make sense, because a lot of the stuff he has on there about him being in the military and him knowing about how to survive in the wild outside of, if you're stranded out, anything like that, you're just learning how to survive, using other things apart from modern day techniques or modern day tools, whatever it is. He is certified in doing those sorts of things, but you don't see any evidence of any of those certifications or certificates on his business page, on his Instagram page, on any other online content that he has posted on there. He doesn't back any of these things up with any proof. And he's even confirmed, and he's even said that a lot of what he does has nothing to do with mixed martial arts. So it does kind of beg the question why he wanted to take Diego Sanchez under his wing in the first place. You know, he more or less got Diego Sanchez fired from his workplace, from the UFC. So that's obviously a big red flag, that this guy didn't even know what he was doing. And I think I can even say before that, because when he became associated and became friends with Diego Sanchez's performance within the octagon, he was still competing, was going downhill. Even though fine, he was approaching the age of retirement that most fighters retire. You know, it doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to lose fights at that age. You can still win fights, but you can clearly see that his performance wasn't good. So obviously, if the fighter's performance isn't good, if the student isn't performing, then you're going to look to the coach. You know, because what you're being trained in, your craft, isn't as good as it should be. So you're going to look to the one place whereby you should be taught the necessary skills to do your best when you're competing, to make sure your craft is as good as it should be. So, and I heard some of the quotes some of the bits of advice he gave to Diego Sanchez when he fought one of his most recent fights before he was cut from the UFC. I can't remember what it was, but it was basically nothing that a good coach would tell their student or tell their fighter that they're coaching to compete within a fighting organization, especially one at standards such as that of the UFC. So I think even before Diego Sanchez was cut from the UFC, the telltale signs were the red flags were there. It was just Joshua Fabia's behavior was just completely weird. Every interview that they were both going to have with the host or whoever, Joshua Fabia always liked to steal the limelight, always like to be the center of attention, make the whole thing be about him. He'd be ranting on for the whole length of the episode, for a whole 50 or 60 minutes. Any other interaction they have with anybody within the UFC, such as the interaction they had back at UFC 253 or so, with the broadcasting with Paul Felder and John Anik, I can't remember what it was, but it was with a meeting that Diego Sanchez was having with the broadcast team, and just without warning, Joshua Fabia just burst in there and was kind of like acting like he was almost like Diego Sanchez's lawyer, like he was speaking for Diego Sanchez. And you can see Diego just standing there, almost like minding his own business, that's letting this person speak for him. And a lot of the guys there, even there and then, they weren't really going to have any of it. Paul Felder said, who the fuck are you? What the fuck are you talking about? I didn't sign up for your lecture. And the other lady there, I can't remember what her name was, but she's also a significant figure. She said, look, this isn't about you. This is about Diego Sanchez. You can fuck off. Because that's, God, if I was in her shoes or in Paul Felder's shoes, I would feel the same way, because they don't know who you are. You're not relevant to this conversation. You're not relevant to the person that we're speaking to. So I don't think this is going to be the last we're going to hear of this matter. I don't think this is going to be the last we're going to hear of the situation. No, I don't think so. I don't think that's okay. Diego Sanchez is going to make a statement. As far as you know, that's what he said. The last time that he kind of confirmed that he's going to be cutting ties with Joshua Fabia. He said he's going to be making another statement to probably give further detail as to what's happened. On the other side with Joshua Fabia, I don't think he's gonna probably let this lie. He likes the attention, even though it's negative attention, even though it's negative press. I'm sure he's gonna still want to speak up to stay in the limelight. So even though, even though this last podcast and interview that he did, it didn't make him look good whatsoever at all. But I think he's still gonna probably run with that still, because he still likes the attention. He still likes to be in the limelight. He still likes all eyes to be on him and his school of self-awareness. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. I'll definitely be keeping a close eye on the situation, because I want to see eventually this guy will cross paths with someone who will probably make life very difficult for him, and probably will not be entertaining any of the nonsense that he's been putting out there. About Diego Sanchez and the stuff that he's been saying about the UFC and about Dana White as well. Which the stuff he said about Dana White was completely irrelevant to this situation. Though I find the UFC are notorious for how they treat their fighters, but still in this situation, the UFC did look after Diego Sanchez. They still paid him his whole purse for the fight that he had with that he should have had with Donald Cerrone. I think it was $211,000 that they paid him. They paid him the whole purse, so they made sure that he was okay before they finally cut ties with him. But I think the reason why Joshua Fabia has been fired by Diego Sanchez, even though Joshua Fabia did say in that interview that he was the one who dismissed Diego Sanchez, I'm sure the reverse obviously is the case. The reason why they cut ties, I think, is because the UFC probably are working on the projects with Diego Sanchez, and they probably only agreed to work with Diego Sanchez if Diego cut Joshua Fabia out of the picture. So potentially that could be the case. I don't know. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. So the other bit I want to talk about is the potential fight that could happen between GSP and Oscar De La Hoya. So I'd like to see this fight happen for two reasons. It'll be an interesting matchup between Oscar De La Hoya, who is someone who, surprisingly, up until recently, who I should have known who he is. I didn't know too much about him. He's a really successful boxer who has won a lot of fights, many fights. So of course he needs no introduction. Many people watching this podcast, if you're interested in mixed martial arts and combat sports like I am, you know who he is, of course. And of course it's GSP, who I know a lot more about. Honestly, I do know far more about him. So basically the point that I'm trying to make here is that the fight potentially that could happen between the boxing match that could potentially happen between them is being blocked by Dana White. And the reason why it's been blocked by Dana White is almost like someone who, I'm not gonna give that analogy, but it's been blocked by Dana White because, well, GSP's contracts with the UFC hasn't fully or officially expired yet. Even though he has retired, he's recently turned 40 years old, but he doesn't compete in the UFC. He doesn't compete in mixed martial arts anymore. But his contracts, as far as I can tell, judging by this situation, is still live. So I think Dana White's blocking this fight because more than likely, I think he believes that GSP will lose and that Oscar De La Hoya will win. I mean, look at what happened between Jake Paul and Ben Askren. Jake Paul, I hate saying that name. I just hate saying that name. I don't think there's any difference between the words, the meaning of the word clown and the word Jake Paul, or the name Jake Paul. So Dana White is concerned that if if George St Pierre loses this fight between himself and Oscar De La Hoya, then it will dent GSP's legacy in mixed martial arts, and also it will hurt the legacy of the UFC, because GSP is considered to be one of the greatest mixed martial arts fighters of all time, and yeah, he is. So they're concerned that if that does happen, then the UFC lose a lot of money. Then clearly they don't have one of the best fighters in the world of mixed martial arts anyway, on the planet. They do not have one of the best. They don't host one of the best fights, or they don't host the best fighting events. They don't host the most entertaining fighting event. And to be honest, they don't. The UFC, at least for now, they don't host. I don't agree that they host the best. Or I don't agree that they host the most entertaining fighting events at the moment. Quite a few of their fight cards have been dull. Even the main cards have been dull. For me, personally speaking, for myself, a lot of the most wow factor fights that I've seen recently have been coming from outside of the UFC. Bellator, One Championship, PFL. I just recently saw that fight between, is it Ferreira and is it Werdum at PFL? PFL, is it 3 or so? I can't remember. It was just about 4 nights ago. It was a crazy fight. How they started, how they finished. It was just fucking mad. So when I see those things, it's testament that the UFC do not have the best fighters, and they do not necessarily host. They do not necessarily have the best fighters, and they do not necessarily host the best fighting events. They don't. And every time I see that outside of the UFC, I'm always reminded of that, which is a fact, because there's no way that they can host the best human beings, the best fighters, basically, the best fighting events. And on top of that, of course, they're notorious for how badly they pay their fighters. For an organization that has the biggest monopoly, the biggest share of the mixed martial arts market when it comes to pay-per-views and the buying of tickets, and how big the events are when they host them. So I was saying so much. So it's understandable why Dana White would not want this fight to happen, but GSP seems to want this fight to happen. Oscar De La Hoya has made no secret that he wants this fight to happen. He wants this fight to happen just as much as GSP does. He probably wants it more to happen. He probably wants this fight to happen more than any. Out of the three of them, he wants the fight to happen the most. And Dana White is thinking strictly from a business standpoint of view. He doesn't care too much about GSP's legacy as such. He more or less is concerned about the company's legacy, which is understandable. He's a businessman. When it comes to business, a business exists to make a profit. So you're a business first before anything else. So that's understandable. Me personally, I would love to see that fight. Be an interesting fight. And if if George St Pierre loses the fight, I've got nothing against George St Pierre. I love him. He's a great guy, great personality, very humble guy, and he's done so well in mixed martial arts. He really has. Oscar De La Hoya is another guy who's also quite likable as well. I have no problem with him. There's nothing about him that I don't like. If George St Pierre loses this fight, and again, I have nothing against him, but if he loses this fight, yes, it will change things a lot for the UFC, and I can see why Dana White is so desperate almost that this fight doesn't happen. Even though, I say desperate, but the fight can't happen because more or less on paper he owns George St Pierre, so the fight won't really happen. But even now, I think the boxing promoter Triller, they're harassing more or less, and they're hounding Dana White. They're blowing up his phone, begging him to let the fight happen, to give George St Pierre permission to participate in this fight, because again, the fight could go the other way. Oscar De La Hoya could lose, and so the UFC would keep their legacy, GSP would keep his legacy as well. There's also that possibility as well. So I think another point to make is that George St Pierre, his wrestling is great, but I think his stand-up is no match for the boxing and striking capability that Oscar De La Hoya possesses. So that's also something that's I'm sure that Dana White and Dana White and Oscar De La Hoya don't like each other. That's nothing uncommon. It's a known fact. They've had issues before in the past, and it's basically, I'm sure it's also one of the reasons why Dana White is not allowing this fight to happen. He wants to feel that he has that power over Oscar De La Hoya as some sort of revenge. But yeah, but if it happened, I'll be glad for it to happen. And if Oscar De La Hoya wins, great. It would make some big changes in the world of mixed martial arts, especially for a company like the UFC. They'll be knocked off that top pedestal of being the number one fighting organization in the mixed martial arts world, and you see some big changes coming. But again, the fight could go the other way. GSP could win, and yeah, so that's also another possibility. So guys, I'm going to wrap this up here. Well, I think I said quite much, said a lot without getting too tongue twisted or tongue tied, without my mouth getting too dry. But if you like this podcast, guys, please don't forget to leave a like. Don't forget to don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to share my content if you liked it. Please share only if you want to. Subscribe only if you want to. But please do subscribe. It really helps me if you do that, and helps my channel and podcast grow. Yeah, you can listen to my content, my podcast on Spotify, on Apple iTunes, and on Google Podcasts. And you can catch me on Instagram. My name is IkeJarko1. On Facebook and Twitter, my name is IkeJarko. Thanks again, guys. Okay, look, there's just one last points that I like to make. I might have, well, no. In the interview with Joshua Fabia and the behind the scenes guys, he did say that, and it's just a question I want to put out there to the audience. Do any of you? He said in the interview, if I ask my question, he said that Joshua Fabia, when he was passing the UFC, in the 2 years that he was coaching before Diego Sanchez was cut, he said that Diego Sanchez was made to throw fights, just and deliberately lose. Now, for something like mixed martial arts fighting, whereby you make weight, you've got to train and keep to a strict diet, you've got to train extensively, excessively, practice your jiu-jitsu, your wrestling, your striking, kickboxing, everything. You've got to make sure conditioning is good, just make sure you're in top shape to perform, to compete and to win. And then you go into the octagon, you take all that abuse, you take all the strikes to the head, those punches to the head, those leg kicks, those brutal leg kicks, those calf kicks, the guillotines, just all sorts of abuse, all sorts of attacks coming from your opponent. Do you really think someone who's going to be put through that, even through everything leading up to that fight, and then the fight itself, in front of all those people, an audience, not just within the venue, even though now we're in the middle of the pandemic, a lot of these events are done in empty venues. But still, a lot of people are watching outside of the venue on their phones, TVs, wherever at home. But a lot of eyes on the sport. A lot of people are watching the competition that you're participating in right now. Do you really think someone in that situation would actually throw the fight? And then think of all the abuse you've taken. Fine, money's involved, but at the same time, you're trying to build a legacy for yourself. You're gonna eventually, for most people, they get married, have children, and they wanna, show their children this is what they did, and if you work hard, son or daughter, you can achieve this as well. Look, I did it. I should be an example to you. I should be a role model to you. Do you really think that Diego Sanchez was made to throw fights while he was competing in the UFC, whilst he was training under Joshua Fabia, whilst he had Joshua Fabia as his coach? Do you really believe that was the case? Because that's what Joshua Fabia said in the interview. I personally don't think it was. I think that he was made to throw fights. I think it was just a lot of bullshit that Joshua Fabia was saying, just to add more salt to the wound, and just tarnish Diego Sanchez even more. But I mean, do you believe that he was? I just want to put that question out there. For me, it seems very, very unlikely. But I just thought I made that extra point, guys. But thanks again.